Hi everyone, we're back. So what I want to explain now is the construction of the output market. And then the output market and the labor market are going to be integrated. But let's go through the features of the output market. So what we have first is an aggregate demand curve, which we'll designate as AD. An aggregate demand curve is in the price output plane. Now price again is the overall price level for the economy. We've done that also with the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. But this is the average price of all goods and services in the economy. And then on the horizontal axis is the level of output, or in this case, real GDP. So what we have now is a downward sloping aggregate demand curve, just very similar to, in fact, a regular demand curve, which says at a high price level P0, the output demand will be Y0. If the price level falls to P1, people will be able to afford a greater amount of expenditures, or a greater amount of goods and services, I should say, and the demand for output will rise. So this is a typical aggregate demand curve. Again, it's really no different than a regular demand curve, except that it's representing demand for the entire economy. Now we also have the factors that shift the aggregate demand curve. And what we're going to focus on this semester is two components: changes in the money supply and changes in government expenditures. So if you recall about a change in the money supply, if there's an open market purchase of securities, the Federal Reserve will buy bonds back from the bank. The banks will then have more excess reserves, and those excess reserves will loan down to businesses and households. Well, that process of borrowing the money by a firm will then the firm can turn around and buy, either hire more workers or maybe build a larger store. That's going to increase demand in the economy. So an increase in the money supply is going to cause this aggregate demand curve to shift outward. Okay? And that'll be one of our big policy tools that we'll look at. And then the second component is an increase in government expenditures. And again, this is federal government expenditures. And could be for domestic programs, for national defense, for international programs. But an increase in government expenditures is also going to shift out the aggregate demand curve. Okay? So that's aggregate demand. Now we have to look at supply in this model. And supply in this model consists of short-run aggregate supply and also long-run aggregate supply. So we break up supply into two factors. And so let's first look at short-run aggregate supply. And the acronym we're going to use is SRAS, short-run aggregate supply. And this, again, is a typical supply curve. Even though it represents supply of goods and services for the entire economy, it still functions the same way. So the price P0, firms are willing to supply this amount of output. If the price level goes up to P1, firms can then produce a greater amount of output, and they can produce output level Y1. So that's standard. And also, this supply curve shifts for the standard reasons. We have, if there's a change in the cost of production, the supply curve will shift. So if there's a decrease in the cost of productions, the short-run aggregate supply schedule shifts outward, just like a regular supply curve. If there's an increase in technology, where now firms are more efficient to produce output, then the supply curve also shifts outward. So again, it's standard operating procedure for the short-run aggregate supply schedule. So conceptually, it works the same way as a regular supply schedule. Then the additional feature in this model is something called long-run aggregate supply. Okay? And long-run aggregate supply schedule represents long-run equilibrium. Okay? And I'm going to erase the board here and then show you how this works generally. But generally, long-run aggregate supply schedule also it reflects capacity in the economy. So, with a given amount of capital stock, a given amount of employment or / population, and a given amount of technology, the economy can produce a certain level of output. And so in a lot of ways, this is going to be long-run equilibrium, and when you put all three curves together, we'll see how they all operate. But the long-run average supply schedule is influenced by long-run factors like capital stocks. I mean, this could be buildings, this could be machinery, tools. And as capital stock or the amount of population and technology changes, this curve can actually shift outward. So, as the economy grows, the capacity of the economy also grows. So as time goes by, as more capital stock is accumulated, we'll see that the longer aggregate supply schedule can shift outward. So with that in mind, let me erase the board here And let's put all three curves together and see how this works. And we'll just give a simple example of the intersection of the three curves, and we'll talk about this notion of long-run equilibrium. So, here we go. Here's output, here's the price level, and now here's long-run aggregate supply, and here is the aggregate demand schedule, and here is short-run aggregate supply. Oops, wanted to get it there. Short-run aggregate supply. Okay, and this we're now going to call this level of output Yn, and I'm going to define this in a minute. And this will be the price level P0. Okay, so and we'll call this intersection point E. So point E is long-run equilibrium. Okay. And so the definition of long-run equilibrium is when all expectations about the future are actually realized. So if in fact we understand what's going to happen tomorrow, we adjust to it, we can then be in long-run equilibrium. So long-run equilibrium is when the economy has adjusted to all economic shocks. And we'll give an example of these economic shocks. So, this Yn is called the natural level of output. Yn is the natural level of output. Natural level of output. Okay. And this is when the economy fully adjusts to all economic shocks. The economy will be at Yn. But what we do is we divide output Y into Yn plus Yc. So Yn is the natural level of output, or where the economy is moving towards. So you could view the economy being at the natural level of output in a similar way to the economy moving to the steady state capital labor ratio. So if you remember from the Solow growth model, that model is built so that if there's some departure from the steady state, the economy naturally goes to the steady state. Okay? This model is the exact same thing. It now is going to gravitate towards Yn. So you could just put in parentheses the steady state. But it's similar in this concept that we're moving towards long-run equilibrium. The natural level of output and the steady state are similar in the sense that they represent movements to the long-run equilibrium, but they're different perspectives on the economy. So we have Y output equals the natural level of output, and Yc is called the cyclical component of output. And this represents departures from long-run equilibrium. Departures from long-run equilibrium. Okay. So, this is where the economy naturally moves towards. And so what I'm going to do next is, I'm going to have a graph. We're going to take a little break, and this will be the end of this part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this market up and also the labor market. And then we're going to look at all the interactions. So the next lecture is pretty detailed. And, but I'm going to take a break, and we'll see you in a little bit. Okay, bye-bye.